Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report, but more importantly, welcome to Brendan Fraser History Month 2024. I'm your host, Devin Decker, and joining me, the current poobah of Fraser. Big round of applause for Sejan Sarwick. How you doing, Sejan?
Hey, Dev. I'm doing real good. We've got a hell of a month lined up. Also, it just all sorts of other crazy stuff going on outside of Brendan Fraser History Month that I'm sure that we're gonna be chomping at the bit to try and talk about. But we've got important shit to do this month.
Yes, we do have very important shit to do this month, but as Sejan said, there are other things going around. So as we always kind of mess around with the structure of the show on this. We're going to give 30 minutes to all of that other stuff before we get to the main course, the snack that is celebrating Brendan Fraser. So that's how we're going to be doing it in 2024. Just to make sure that we're touching on other stuff and other things that are going on. Because there are other things that are going on that also weirdly relate to Brendan Fraser History Month in weird ways. I don't know. I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off. Where are we at with Sony trying to buy Paramount, see, Jim?
I mean, streaming across the board is like this is part of the reason why we feel like we needed to talk more than just about these specific things this year, right? Because things are moving so harsh and so fast and in so many weird directions with the things that with the ways in which we engage with these movies and this television and all of this sort of stuff that we're going to be talking about that we can't not talk about it for the next month, right? Because the Sony Paramount stuff, definitely top of the list of things to talk about. Also, HBO possibly losing its NBA contract, which means that Max is looking less and less like a ideal package nowadays, right? Especially because it seems like annually we are hearing about cullings coming from Zavslov's office to get rid of more and more material on Max. I don't know, man. It's all the Sony Paramount stuff is definitely newsworthy, but I'm numb to this streaming stuff right now because of all the nonsense that's going on with it.
I don't disagree. I just think it's kind of a huge step for Sony because it would give a very, very Japanese company, which not anything they're housed in Japan, right? That they are a Japanese company. It would give them an American-based foothold into the studio system. I mean, much larger footprint than they currently have with things like Lionsgate and Columbia.
But
So
the thing you got to remember is that it wouldn't be their first time attempting something like this.
right.
I mean, they've had multiple iterations of trying to do their own type of streaming service, and the Sony Store alone on the PS4 on the PlayStation, right? But remember when they released probably about 5 years ago, they tried to get the PlayStation TV off the ground, which basically came like a Roku TV or like a Samsung that had pre-installed apps and you would have access directly to the Sony Store through it and stuff, and they couldn't get it to go anywhere. People just didn't buy them or even knew they existed.
Yeah, they came out in America in 2014, so it was 10 years ago
10
that
years
PlayStation
ago,
TV
yeah.
happened. And the really crazy thing is that it was kind of just the PS Vita. We got all these PS Vitas sitting around because nobody's interested in our second handheld system. So why don't we reconfigure them to be like little set-top computers?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they have Sony has tried to get into the streaming game before and has gotten their ass handed to them. I mean, most recently they had a ton of issues with the PlayStation side of things, with the PlayStation video side of things, because Crunchyroll going under screwed them. But there was somebody else too. Was it MGM or something like that? A couple of different companies, but for sure Crunchyroll, with those services going under and Sony having tied the licensing to what they sold to those things, meant that anybody that paid through Sony for these things was just going to lose out. And there was no recourse to get money back or anything like that. And a lot of finger pointing at Sony in that regard, even though they didn't really have any control over these companies deciding to go under and pull licensing, but they still kind of sold a bill of goods, right? And that hey, you purchase this through us, you will have access to this material. And the difference being, when you're buying a TV show, you are buying something that you kind of it is just as bad as when they do this with video games, but I think the reason why it hit people harder this time is because more episodes, you're buying multiple things of, very often you're going back and buying more and more and more and more. So there's kind of that weird hit there where I have I have come back to this series every year for the last 10 years, and now you're going to do this to me. Whereas like a game you bought 10 years ago hurts, but like you haven't really sat down and played with it in 10 years. So like there's this weird disconnect that consumers have, which allows Sony and other companies to get away with this kind of shit, right? Pull the licensing on stuff. So but then like there's also this whole other element to the whole Sony Paramount stuff that is the Paramount side of things. I like, as far as I was understanding it, Paramount Plus, out of all of the like, let's call them second tier streaming services, or maybe like second generation streaming services because they came in later in the game, right?
They're second wave streaming. That's what I like to call it because it's very alliterative.
Second wave, yeah. So like, so of the second wave streamers out there, I was under the impression Paramount Plus was doing okay for themselves comparatively. Like, all streaming services secretly are not making anybody any fucking money, right? But comparatively, it sounded like Paramount was actually ahead of the game in some regards. So to find out that they also were kind of in this position to be bought or wanting to be bought was also kind of interesting.
I mean, what is being purchased is not just Paramount Plus, it is Paramount Global that would be purchased by Sony. And the current offer on the table is $26 billion in cash. An amount of money that anyone out there would struggle to comprehend. Because like that's just so much paper.
It's gonna have to be contested, right? This is one of those merger type situations where you kind of are like, I would like someone to look into this because this feels like less choice as a consumer, right? And I feel like that needs to be addressed. You know,
I agree with you on exactly what you're saying. The problem is a precedent has been set with Disney's acquisition of 20th Century Fox. So I don't know how much pushback.
But they stopped AT&T and all of that from merging. They said those guys couldn't do that entertainment merge, right?
But wasn't that prior to Disney Plus? Like, I feel like...
No, it was after.
Okay. Sorry, I don't remember. It's all so crazy. I mean, the first thing is you say that Paramount Plus seems to be the one that's doing it well. It has their ducks in a row. One of the main reasons for that is that Paramount Plus is the evolution of CBS All Access. So even though Paramount Plus is technically a second wave streaming service, it had CBS All Access was there in the beginning. Much.
Just to clarify, 2022, AT&T tried to buy Warner Discovery.
Oh, okay.
And they didn't let that happen in 2022. So they have stepped in and stopped
AT&T had
kind of
owned
stuff
briefly. My fault there. I apologize because I thought AT&T was the owners of Warner Brothers and all of that, and then the Discovery thing, once it was coming in, that was the problem. So then AT&T had to move because there were definitely episodes of Last Week Tonight where he's like our corporate overlords, and he put up AT&T pictures.
Yeah. So, no, I mean, maybe that's it. Is like that's the problem. Is like this stuff gets so squishy and so weird. Everybody's buying everybody, and the truth is everything's owned by just like three companies,
people,
right?
Yeah.
But like everything's owned by Pepsi. God damn it. Mr. Pepsi comes in with his big old money bags.
Hello, I'm Mr. Pepsi, and I'm the rich person for a new generation.
You also sound like a lush.
Oh, have you ever mixed Jim Beam with Pepsi? It's delicious. It's sweeter than your Coke and Jim Beam that most people tend to enjoy. I have but one goal in this universe, Sejan, and that is when you go into a restaurant and order a Coke, they currently say, is Pepsi okay? I want people to go into a restaurant, order a Pepsi, and have to be asked, is Coke okay? And then vehemently say, no, I demand a Pepsi. You go out to your local Taco Bell, KFC, or Pizza Hut, they're all yummy brands owned by me, and you get me a goddamn Pepsi, 'cause your Coke is bitter, and I do not enjoy it with my Applebee's food in this neighborhood. I was gone for a second there. What happened?
Yeah. So like everything is all owned by AT&T in the end, right? Time Warner just owns everything now. So like it's just so Paramount being owned by Sony would mean like across the board just so many different things that you'd be seeing in front of your eyeballs that like would be money directly in their pocket, which is just less and less and less things now, less and less choice nowadays, right? Like
Yeah.
everybody feels that way already about Disney, but the truth of the matter is that it's the same thing with Warner Brothers Discovery and now Sony,
The
what will eventually be
Universal
Sony Paramount.
Amazon like kind of connection that is there, but they really don't want you to notice it. But it's pretty strange that stuff goes to Peacock for like 2 weeks and then it's on Amazon. Like they have some sort of backroom deal that we don't want to talk about. Netflix and Max have some sort of background deal because all of the DC movies that used to be exclusive to Max are now on Netflix. And relating to the Brendan Fraser topic that we're going to be covering, a spin-off of Doom Patrol that we watched the backdoor pilot of in season 3 is now a Netflix original series.
Yeah, they did tie it into Netflix's Sandman as well, which is fair.
Which makes sense, but
yeah, but well, you know, and that gets really weird because of the whole like CW stuff, right? Like how Doom Patrol has always kind of been a spin-off, like somewhat slightly connected to the CW verse. In fact, I think even Cliff and somebody else,
Cliff and Jane
Cliff and
showed
one
up.
other person.
Yeah,
Cliff and Jane show up in like the Crisis on Infinite Earths, right?
Yeah, I mean they show up dancing, which is kind of what Doom Patrol is known for in my mind. I love Doom Patrol, I'm not going to lie, but yeah, they show them dancing as one of the Earths. They don't interact with anybody, but it's an acknowledgement of like, yeah, this is part of it. It's also weird though because the Teen Titans of the show Titans show up and they are on a different world than the different universe than the universe that they showed Doom Patrol as part of.
Yeah,
which is
the whole multiverse stuff got really kind of silly with that, but in a way that like the movies could never pull off, right? Like in a like super successful way that the like in its kind of nonsensical, none of this really adds up way, it actually gave it more room to be more ridiculous in that regard, right? Whereas like the movies were struggling so hard to ground everything that they never went anywhere.
Right, but that's because a movie is trying to serve too many masters. The beauty of the television show and why we saw the golden age of television is, yes, they are trying to serve one master, and that master is advertisers. However, studio interference with the shows is not as prevalent as what we see in cinema. Very much.
The Swamp Thing. Yeah.
Well, man. I mean, that's... Let's talk... You know what I was reminded of while we were preparing for the Brendan Fraser portion of this episode? DC Universe. Do you remember the DC Universe streaming service, CJim?
For like a hot second. It lasted less than a year, didn't it?
Yeah, because I sure as hell didn't. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, I forgot. No, I completely forgot that that's where this all started. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you bring up Swamp Thing, and it's like, then I have to bring up DC Universe, because that was... like the weird crown jewel of DC Universe was we're going to do Swamp Thing and we're not going to give a fuck about anything. We're going to use the language. We're going to be hyper graphic. And then they canceled DC Universe. So like Swamp Thing lived in a weird limbo until they showed all 10 episodes on the CW, horrifically edited.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
So it wasn't even recognizable. But yes, so... when I look at it, we had CBS All Access, right? They were right there with DC Universe. DC Universe also kind of a first wave, maybe like a 1.5 wave streaming service. And it's just... It
had to die so that others could rise from its ashes, so that HBO Max and what is now Max could kind of come up behind it.
Just like CBS All Access, which was, oh God, ABC and NBC and Fox have teamed together to create Hulu. Either we join this deadly alliance, that's for Mortal Kombat fans out there, or we try to set up our own service and stand alone. And
there's so many different groups you could have mentioned that would have been actually referential to today.
I know, but I mean, technically Mortal Kombat is referential to today because NetherRealm Studios is owned by Warner Brothers and all of the Mortal Kombat, like, film adaptations are on Max. So, I mean, it works. It's just not like 101. It's like a master's course on things I could have referenced. I don't know why I'm defending myself to you. It's our show, and we're going to do what we want to do. We're going to say what we want about everything. But yes, So CBS All Access comes along, and then that's what mutates and evolves into Paramount Plus, which is assuredly a second wave streaming service, along with HBO Max, and then those both grow. Like, Paramount Plus was smart because let's merge with Showtime, which is also owned by our parent company. So the fact that if you're on Paramount Plus without ads, you have all access to the Showtime stuff is crazy. To the fact that Showtime's streaming app is gone. That's where Paramount Plus is doing it correctly. Where like Disney, I just had this conversation with some people. Shout out to Claude. Hi, Claude. And the fact that we currently have Hulu and Disney Plus. And honestly, I don't understand why, because all the Hulu stuff is on Disney Plus. And I had to say, but you understand, if you didn't have that Hulu account, none of the Hulu stuff would be available to you on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
It's just a means of convenience that you only need to live in one app to access everything. But you need 2 subscriptions to do it. Paramount Plus, no, you pay for no commercials. We'll give you Showtime as well. We'll give you the stuff that doesn't have commercials that we own.
Yeah, I mean, we see the worst of the worst in the other direction with Amazon nowadays, right? Like, if you don't have a subscription to Amazon, and then on top of that, what, BritBox or Showtime TV, or Paramount or Acorn or everything up there is actually cordoned off and sectioned off into other places where you need to have access. Yeah, it's that is a nightmare, right? And that is that is the worst kind of example of that. And then what you're talking about with Paramount Plus is kind of the best of the other side of it, right? Is that you pay for this one thing and you've got access to all of it, right? And it's the thing that everybody keeps kind of worrying they're going to lose in something like Netflix with all the changes that Netflix has made over the years.
Well, I mean, the crazy thing, since we've brought up Amazon, since we're talking about all of this streaming stuff before getting hyper-focused, Amazon Prime, you now have commercials unless you pay that $3 monthly fee to be commercial free. But that also is crazy because they have Freevee, which is owned by Amazon, formerly IMDb TV, and also has ads. But then the weird thing that Amazon does is leverage redemption, which is oh my God, we have leverage. Isn't that awesome? Everybody loved Leverage. And Amazon is the exclusive place for Leverage and its follow-up series. They went and took Leverage from Freevee and moved it to Amazon Prime. And you know what that says to me as a consumer? This show is doing really well, but the service we're providing it on is dog shit, and nobody wants to play ball with Freevee. So we're going to put it on the one that people actually like.
I mean, Freevee is a nightmare. Have you ever partaken of anything on Freevee?
So, Greg Garcia, My Name is Earl, Raising Hope, Yes Dear. Mm-hmm. He had a show called Sprung that came out, I believe it was 2022, and it was a show about the people who nonviolent crimes that were released from prison because of overcrowding during COVID. Right? We don't have enough. So that show was a Freevee show, and I love Greg Garcia, and I watched the first episode of it, and I have not gone back to another one, despite loving it. It's Garrett Dillahunt. It is Steph from the Goonies. I can't think of her name. Martha or Marcia, the mom from Raising Hope. I'm sorry.
Oh, Martha Plimpton.
Martha Plimpton, thank you. I knew her name was Steph in the Goonies. She's Mouth's consolation prize. Goonies is a troubled and problematic movie. Maybe we'll talk about it someday. Maybe we won't. All I know is the octopus was very scary. And I loved it. I really enjoyed the show. I liked everything about it. I think the story was really interesting because, that's Greg Garcia has this really wonderful topic and ability to find these stories that you kind of don't know about. We talked about Super Clyde and that weird show that tried to happen twice and just failed, right? Diane Guerrera was going to be in one version of it, so it's at least thematically appropriate to talk about it. So there's something that I want to do, but Freevee, the amount of ads, the repetition of the ads, because they only have 2 people who bought ad space with them, right?
Mhm.
So you know Bounty Paper Towels is feeling pretty good, right? They're not a sponsor here, but and I don't even know if they're a sponsor on Freevee. I just feel like any time that I've ever had to watch ads on a streaming service is been for paper towels. And I don't
Yeah,
know
and purple
why.
mattresses. Yeah, also the placement, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that comes with kind of the amount of ads. There's so many ads that the placement is impossible for them to do properly, and it is jarring for people to be like mid-sentence and for it to just cut to a paper towel commercial is just like it is again like the whole Amazon atmosphere, like the whole ecosystem over there is just like the worst of the worst as far as I'm concerned.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. And I agree. So, like, those are the two ends of the spectrum. It makes sense why Sony, if they're trying to get I mean, like you said, nobody is making money. But Paramount, they've got Mission Impossible. They're connected with Skydance, who also tried to buy Paramount Global, but for nowhere near the amount of money that Sony, along with Apollo purchasing, it's not just Sony who's involved. It's
no,
one
of course
other
not.
group.
It's some
Apollo Global
yeah.
Management. Sony Pictures Entertainment and Apollo Global Management are the two who are offering.
Hey, I wonder what else Apollo Global Management has their fingers.
Why don't we do that? That should be fun. Do you want me to fill or should you while we look up what Apollo
no.
Global
You
owns?
keep talking. I'm gonna look up our new
Paramount corporate overlords. But Paramount has Nickelodeon, which has the Ninja Turtle license, right? Because Viacom is the one who owns Paramount. So they have Ninja Turtles, which have never been hotter, right? We're celebrating the 40th anniversary. If you've been listening to the show, I think the Turtles have been name-checked at least the last 4 episodes, if not 5. So the Turtles are something that people are talking about. They just had a new game released, and that was a game that was created in 2017, and then they're like, I don't know if it's market viable to sell, and yet 7 years later, it is available on all of the systems, but it is very much a product of 2017. So that you have that. You have the Mission Impossible franchise that is roaring up the charts. You have Halo is there, and regardless of nobody talking about it, people are watching the Halo series based on everything that is being shown. They are in bed with Taylor Sheridan. So your Yellowstone, it's on the Paramount Network, and even though it's licensed out to NBC Universal, and that's why it's on Peacock, because they have Taylor Sheridan, they're able to do all the Yellowstone prequels, 1883, 1923, all the Taylor Sheridan spinoffs, Tulsa King, Mayor of Kingstown, Lioness, Special Ops. They have the product at Paramount. The problem is, for so long, the front-facing, like, entity avatar of Paramount has been CBS. And CBS is for old people. That is the perception on the streets.
Okay.
Having
Yeah, well, so Apollo, just to talk about some other things
Yeah.
that they've got their fingers in that might go in line with this. Cox Media, Legendary Entertainment, Redbox, let's see, Yahoo. They are heavily invested in what's left of Yahoo, and then some smaller ones that aren't necessarily film related, but maybe kind of in this realm. Sirius Satellite, looks like Qdoba, but like so they are
the Mexican
they
restaurant, they own Qdoba, the
yeah,
Mexican restaurant.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they are known for what's called investing in alternative assets, which basically means they find, stuff across the board that they put their money behind and see how it does. And it's all about making money. They're just a hedge fund essentially. But their involvement in the Paramount stuff is interesting, especially if you consider some stuff like Yahoo TV and how that kind of became lost media.
Yeah.
And how they could bring some of that stuff forward with them. Legendary Entertainment. I mean, we've talked about Legendary all the time and about how they step in and picked up some of the weirder franchises over the years that have taken off. They were for a while kind of like your go-to like we don't know what other movie to see this weekend. There's some weird movie. There's some weird horror comedy out this weekend. Let's go to that. Or there's some weird fantasy movie. Vin Diesel is like I think he's a witcher at this one. I don't know. Let's go see.
Yeah, he's the last of his kind. He's the last witch hunter.
Yeah.
Jeez,
But
I don't.
there is some interest there for them to be kind of getting into this, but it seems like this would be their first big like real step into this kind of streaming stuff specifically.
I mean, the kind of gross thing about it, right? TikTok has been banned. It's still out there. You can still use TikTok, but it has been passed. And the way that TikTok will not be banned is if the Chinese company that like owns TikTok divests from it, and TikTok is no longer owned by a Chinese company. We're gonna stop there. I don't want to get any more political than that part of it. But then, if you're Sony Pictures, for them to team up with what sounds like pretty much the most American thing since apple pie in terms of alternative investments. Like, I think that's why you bring Apollo to the table. Exactly what you said. Like, they want to avoid any sort of impropriety with that. Because Sony being one of the big 5 studios right now, right? With your Sony, Paramount, Universal, Disney, and the last guy, which I feel really bad that I can never remember the last guy.
Amazon?
No. Frick. I can't. It used to be Fox, but it's not. It's one other one. Let me look it up, and then fill some time.
Pepsi, Mr. Pepsi.
Mr. Pepsi. No. Hollywood.
Yeah, but like I have to wonder. The other thing is that we live
MGM
in very
is the
obvious
last one.
bubbles.
Sorry.
MGM, which is Amazon. So
Yes, but
but we live in some pretty serious bubbles, right? Like this comes up all the time, things that we like take for granted as being universal experiences. And one of those bubbles that we and I know a few of our listeners are in is that we forget that Sony is a company outside of PlayStation. Sony is a company outside of its films. Like Sony is a whole other like billion-dollar company for all these other things that it does. Yes, electronics mostly and stuff, but there's all sorts of things that they're in, right? And we talk about Sony like film like in these conversations as if like Sony doesn't have a bunch of other interests and money backing them when they do make some of these bigger mistakes. It's part of the reason that they've been able to survive some pretty heinous like accusations and bullshit over the years, controversies over the years. Like is that Sony has always been able to fall back on some stuff. But also, how much longer can their interest kind of be in this shit, right? Like on a very small scale, right? Look at everything that's going on with them and the few pieces of Marvel properties that they have.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot imagine that they're going to push much longer to hold on to that shit. With the floor falling out on comic book movies as it is, them not even really having access to like any of the big hitters anymore, and what they have done is really poisoned the well. They're going to sell that stuff off sometime in the next 5 years, right? Like by 2030, they are no longer going to be in the Marvel game.
That's a big swing, but I don't disagree. I mean, Kraven the Hunter getting pushed back to December, and there's still supposedly being a third Venom movie coming this year, despite I'm hearing a lot more about Kraven than about Venom 3, and what happened with Madam Web.
Right, and there's a lot of conversation about how whatever ties Kraven had to some other stuff, after credit scenes or whatever, may not come to fruition because they're just not really caring about that anymore. Like, and that could just be fans just losing their shit. But I also could easily see them saying, "Yeah, we're just not going to do that this time because we're sick of getting our asses handed to us when we try and do that properly." Poor Michael Keaton. Between this and between the Vulture stuff kind of falling apart and all of this, and then the Batgirl film over at Warner Brothers getting fucking eaten, so that his whole return there didn't.
Warner Brothers is definitely the 5th studio that I said, because MGM is Walt Disney too. So the big 5, just to make sure that I say it, is Universal Pictures, Paramount Pictures, Warner Brothers, Walt Disney Studios, and then Sony Pictures. That's the big 5. So if Sony Pictures takes the second oldest studio that exists, Paramount Pictures, which they would get with Paramount Global, that, I mean, there'd be a big 4 in Hollywood, right? And I think that would just be fantastic. But it would also, I mean, that's a huge library of movies. The craziest thing that I have noticed as I have gone on these streaming expeditions is how many films are Paramount films that are being licensed off to something else. And I think Sony, after the whole Discovery thing, because we think about that Discovery thing, and everybody kind of got mad at Sony, right? Like, what do you mean the Mythbusters that I bought on my PS3 I'm not going to be able to watch anymore? But the licensing that was up with that was driven by Warner Brothers and Discovery Channel, right. and to make Sony look like the bad guy. This could be retaliatory strikes for that action of Sony getting in bed with Paramount Pictures and then being like, hey guys, all those Paramount things that we license out, they're ours now. And the only way you're going to get
really
that
does show a
entertainment,
huge,
sorry,
it would be a big move on their part, like you're saying. Like to buy in on Paramount would really show that they are committed to actually beefing up that part of their whole company, right? Like a part of their company that, as I said, we talk about a lot, but really I can't think of. They had some investment in like some of the James Bond stuff a while back, right? But even that seemed to have gone to the wayside with MGM kind of bouncing in and out of closing, right? And all that. Like, I don't know, like Sony, it would make Sony a major player in a way that in a major player in film in a way that I have never really considered them before, right? Sony has always been one of the little guys. Yes, they've been one of the big five, but like not. That's like taking the Justice League and trying to find the top 5 members there. Okay, I'll give you Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman, but then what are 4 and 5, right? And Sony is like, okay, sure, yeah, all right. Like, I guess I could play that game, but this move to buy up Paramount and as you mentioned, its back library and everything, like, is nuts. How are TriStar and Columbia involved in all of this? Are they shoot-offs? Like, are they offshoots of Paramount,
or are they
different
Sony
companies
Pictures
entirely? Those are Sony already.
Columbia is a Sony Pictures company. I believe TriStar is a Sony Pictures company as well. They're just ones that they've collected throughout the days. It seems like what this has made me look at, and again, this is just one guy's opinion based on what I've seen, it kind of feels like Sony has slowly but surely been like collecting all of these small companies, and then once you have the company, you have their back catalog. And from there, I mean, once you have the content, you can be king. That's why Disney Plus was such a appealing thing to everybody is, oh my God, think of all the Disney movies that will only be on Disney Plus. And then you're like, yeah, but why isn't this movie there? Or why is this movie there? Like, what are you doing, Disney? Why didn't you make yourself this shining castle on the hill? And it's... I
mean, Disney's always prided itself on bottlenecking its material, right? Like, think of like the Disney Vault, like shit from back in the 90s, yeah. Yeah, so like I'm not too surprised that they don't put everything up, but you are right. The things that they choose to put up sometimes are a head scratcher.
Yeah. Well, also, to TriStar Pictures is now Columbia Pictures. It grew into that. But then if it is an old like TriStar thing, they'll put the TriStar logo before it. Like if Hudson Hawk 2 came out, which I know it would never happen, hopefully, for many, many reasons. I think that they would start with the TriStar logo, even though like technically it doesn't.
You get Hudson Hawk 2 with like a Channing Tatum playing the Bruno role. Like I
don't know. It's just that like with Bruce Willis not acting anymore and all that. That's more where I was taking it. But you do bring up a good point there, right? Like it's everything is ripe for remake. I mean, I'll talk briefly here before we get into it. I saw The Fall Guy on Friday. And I had a lot of fun with it. I think it's a half hour longer than it needs to be because it kind of messes with the pacing of it. But if you know Glenn Larson and his contributions to entertainment, it's more of an adaptation of the Glenn Larson universe than just The Fall Guy. And that was fun for me. It was fun catching all of these crazy references to other shows that Glenn Larson did, using The Fall Guy as the catch-all to like be the vehicle for it. But I don't think we're going to see, in fact, I have one other thing I want to do before we get to the Brendan Fraser of it all. Thank you for bearing with us, but we do still want to do a show for everybody about the things that are going on, and these are the things that have been catching my mind. I want to check Box Office Mojo and see how The Fall Guy is doing right now.
I don't know. It had a lot of pre-hype, but
Yeah.
I don't know how it's doing in general. Um,
Um,
yeah, I
yeah.
yeah, I think the big thing that like all of the streaming stuff that really is going to hit, especially when we start talking about the Brendan Fraser stuff, is just all of this stuff is just potential lost media now, right? Like the big thing that's going on with all of these streaming mergers, no matter who's buying who or who's getting in on what, every time you hear this stuff now, it's just like hold on to your butts because we don't know what we're going to lose in all this. And it doesn't seem like we're gaining anything ever. There's never any time where these kinds of mergers come up, where these purchases happen, and the audience gets anything out of it.
Yeah. Right now, that's kind of crazy. Domestically, the Fall Guy has made $10 million, $10.5 million, and that's only with 1 day reporting, which is also crazy that Saturday is not in there yet. Right? Usually, when we do the show, if we check Box Office Mojo for a film that came out on Friday, we have a pretty solid idea of how the weekend is going to go. So that's crazy. But then looking at the budget for the Fall Guy of $130 million, $10 million on opening day, that's not great. And they're saying that it looks like it's going to make $40 million total.
Over the weekend or
Over the
in
weekend.
general? Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, right? Do other movies have a chance anymore? Internationally, it's made $8 million, so its worldwide number is 18.8 million. So, I mean, that's good, but I don't know. And it's got two of the people from Barbenheimer, right? You got Ken and Ryan Gosling coming to be the Fall Guy, and Emily Blunt coming over from Oppenheimer. So, like, I feel like this was a movie that they were putting a lot of eggs in the basket of. You're not wrong about that pre-hype. So, I mean, that's just a thing to look at. I mean, that's Universal, too, so it's unrelated to the other stuff of it. But it's a movie that came out this weekend that, like, I felt the need to drag myself to go see. And that's because I grew up with the Fall Guy in this house. My father loves the show. I grew up with all the Glenn Larson stuff. That's why I'm catching, like, stupid throwaway lines that are references to his series. I was upset there was no Rooster reference. That will be my complaint. Sorry, I do apologize for going a little off topic. On the Say Report, the show literally about everything. Anything that you want to say before Brendan Fraser time, Sejin, or?
Yeah, no, just watch what you can now.
Yeah.
Like if there's something that you've wanted to be that you've been putting off, I suggest you watch it because if this Sony Paramount stuff is going to have ripples of its own. Whoever knows what the next merger is going to be. Plus, when it comes to Max, it could literally just be a Tuesday and you'll lose everything.
Yes, it was the most important day of your life, but for David Zaslav, it was Tuesday. So I guess the last thing I want to say, and then we'll go to Brendan Fraser time, is I have finished Knuckles. I love Knuckles, though it does feel like they scanned my brain while I was sleeping and said, let's make a show just for Devin Decker. I know that that's like that's like main character syndrome. Musical references, film references that, like, I don't know if other people are as aware as I am of this particular thing. It's great, though. I loved Knuckles. If you want to talk about it, the doors are open. But yeah.
First episode is up on YouTube, by the way. I believe that they did that Paramount Plus thing where they put the first full episode up.
Cool. So check it out. Check it out. See if you like it. Really worked for me. I do love the Sonic movies, though. Again, those were two movies that, like, really surprised me because I didn't expect a Sonic adaptation to be as good as those two films are. And Knuckles, I said it before, I'll say it again. He is the peacemaker of the Sonic the Hedgehog cinematic universe, and I am here for it. Seriously, Julian Barrett is in it, Sejin. Julian Barrett. Noel Fielding who is what I have to say. It's fantastic stuff. All right. So that's it. That's our talk on sort of the state of streaming before we look at the Brendan Fraser bit of pop culture that we're celebrating today. We've done the first couple of seasons. If you want to go catch up, the Say Patrol episode from 2019, right, when the first season aired. Was that 2019 that the first season of Doom Patrol aired? God, that made me feel very old.
It might be.
Like, yeah. Well, it was on DC Universe. I remember having to get a DC Universe plan to watch it. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
February through
2019.
May 24th, 2019, the last episode aired, and we recorded the Say Patrol. So you could go listen to our thoughts on season 1 there. And then we did season 2 Patrol as part of our 5th year of Brendan Fraser History Month. So you can listen to our thoughts on season 2. And now, here we are at season 3 Patrol. I don't know the title yet. That'll, you know, because you got to look at it, but we haven't looked at it yet. That's we don't know what we're going to call it. But we are looking at season 3 of Doom Patrol. And even though this isn't a time capsule episode of the Say Report, Sejan, this first episode of season 3 really feels like it will last as a time capsule of what happened with television, media, movie, entertainment because of the 2020 pandemic. Am I off the beam with that read on this first episode, Possibilities Patrol?
I mean, yeah, you're talking about because it feels like it really should have been like the end of season 2-ish. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah,
or what?
Very famous.
Because it definitely feels like that.
Famously, they had to stop production on season 2. Famously, I guess if you're in the know, they had to stop production on season 2 of Doom Patrol. And so the penultimate episode of season 2 becomes the season 2 finale. So then you get to season 3, and the first episode really feels like a finale. And a lot of the shows that came back in 2021, that is what the first episode felt like. First episode of Young Sheldon is another one that sticks with me, where I'm like, oh, that's weird. Yeah, he like graduates in the first episode of the season. And it's like, so that feels like that's how you wanted to end last season. But, you know, old mean Mr. COVID came along and stopped production.
Well, and then that gets us over onto episode 2 of Vacay Patrol, which definitely feels like it is the season opener, right? Because like they're all in these disparate places. They want to go. They want to get out. They take a road trip. It's a literal road trip episode.
Yeah.
And then that ending, right, where like it's the big cliffhanger ending of at the end of the season opener where they all get killed, right? Like season 2 is so perfectly built to be this pilot for this season, and it is buried behind episode 1, which is like this whole, like, I've been sitting on my fucking hands for a year now, like what's going on in this story moment.
Yeah, because the last time we had seen a Doom Patrol episode was August 6th of 2020, Wax Patrol, with the Candlemaker and all of that. And then it is September 23rd, 2021. So 13 months have passed between what was supposed to be the lead into a finale, and then you have to watch Possibilities Patrol because it does set up for what the third season's going to be. Madame Rouge shows up at the end with her time machine. It's one of the reasons why they want to get the fuck out of there. Like, not just everything that they just went through, but also, like, the mansion doesn't feel safe anymore. The death of Niles Calder, spoilers. Like, it makes sense why they go on Vacay Patrol. And Vacay Patrol, I love that one because it feels like Dirty Dancing, and you know I'm a fan of Dirty Dancing. But then, I love Rod Stewart. I will admit that. Alphaville's Forever Young is the better Forever Young. So that dance sequence at the end of it, where it's Kay begins dancing in Jane's mind because she hears the song, and then they all come in. The Cliff with Rita and Jane dancing, and he twirls them out and brings them in before it becomes the dance circle. It's such a beautiful episode. I really love, I can't pronounce his name, Gygax?
Garguax?
Garguax, yeah. The fact
Garguax, the Death Evader.
Who was sent there in like the 50s and just had to sit on his hands too. Like, he becomes this weird sort of audience XB in everything that's happening there. And then that ending, not just that everybody dies, right? Which, for the Doom Patrol, who it's supposed to be, like, Niles Calder's whole thing with the Doom Patrol, sorry to Doom Patrol explain this, is he's trying to find a way to live forever so that he can protect Dorothy. So that's why the negative force with Larry and Rita's whole mutation because of whatever she absorbed in that river. And Jane trying to find a personality that is immortal and then capture the essence of it. And Cliff with coming down to just putting the brain into a robot body so that I am at least here for her in some way, right? So for he dies, right? And I was unable to stop myself from dying. And then you kick off season 3 with all of these people whose immortality is sort of the defining reason they're a member of the Doom Patrol, and they all get killed. And then none more important death than the fact that Rita is about to get away before she is face to face with her time travel counterpart, who shoves her back into the room and apologizes, making sure that there's no way for her to get away. Like, it is this beautiful, it is what Doom Patrol for me has always done the best, which is a fantastic musical number that weirdly brings all of the characters together. People like us in Danny the Street's first episode, I think it's season 8 of episode 1 of season 8, episode 8 of season 1. I swear I'll get them together. Even though it's just Larry singing at that point, the cut-ins of Cliff dancing with the neighbor boy who's dressed as a robot, or Rita and Jane's things. Like, it's this great moment where they're all weirdly connected, even though they're separated. So, like, it is Doom Patrol firing at all cylinders in that Forever Young moment. And then, of course, they're never allowed to be happy, so then they die. The invincible, immortal team dies.
Yeah.
And that's awesome.
I mean, including who we have not yet talked about, but even including Cyclops. I was gonna Cyborg. Yeah. But like including this like beloved like DC character who we have talked about has been kind of this really weird insert into the series, is like bringing Cyborg into the Doom Patrol has always fascinated me, and the ways in which he plays so well within the team and within the stories, and this whole idea of like them seeing themselves as monsters and these things that are trapped in immortality and all of this, and how does Cyborg like see himself in that conversation has always been really interesting. But to even have him like dead on the floor by the end of that is like it's wild. It is one of those moments, and there's a lot of these moments in season 3 in particular, right? Like I'm thinking of like the entire zombie episode that we get a few episodes later. But like this is one of those moments that made you realize this could only have ever worked on HBO or Max or whatever, right? Yeah. This was never going to be something that would have worked on normal television, on air television. This show and what it was allowed to do, what it has been allowed to do is fascinating to me. And the fact that it is one of those ones that hasn't disappeared yet is fascinating to me. Somebody up there must really love this show. Somebody high up in those HBO offices is just like anything but Doom Patrol.
Yeah. And because people still watch it, I'm able to have conversations with people. But when you say this is a series that could have never gone anywhere else, this had to live on streaming, I agree. Because the first time that I watched season 3, because it had been a year since seeing season 2 and 2 years since seeing the first season, I decided to watch everything again. I decided I'm going to start from the beginning, I'm going to catch up, and then I'm going to roll right into season 3. And I invited my family to join because I really enjoy the show. I think that Doom Patrol is doing something special before we even get to the Brendan Fraser of it all, right? I think these are characters you don't generally see. I think they're telling stories that you don't generally see on TV. I think that they're getting into the shit, like real emotional shit that like other shows don't have time for, right? Speaking of Paramount Plus shows, like Fire Country, like they do not ever think about the emotional impact of the things that are happening in that show, right? The little 12-year-old loses her mother, and then the next one, she's just happily living with her step family, right? Like, it's like, oh, we're not even going to touch on the emotional resonance of what this girl is going through because the show needs to move on and people just need more content. Doom Patrol's not like that. And so we watched the first episode and the rest of the family was like, we're out. This is depressing. And yeah, it is kind of depressing in a lot of it, but you see how low they go so that the highs feel even better. And that is something that season 3 really exemplifies.
Yeah. I mean, like the entire relationship. I mean, to start narrowing in on like some of the Brendan Fraser stuff, like the entire relationship between Cliff and Clara this entire season, right? And the push and pull of him trying to be a better person and her seeing that, so that's why she sticks by him. But like he falls into some bad shit this season, addictions galore, right? And she, she has to kind of push him in ways and stuff. But it's sweet to see him try, and it's sweet to see her stand by him, and it really works. But to your point, you get these really beautiful moments with them, but they come out of these like really depressing addiction stories or like the possible Parkinson's storyline and things like that. Like there's so much going on there that is like really, really like hard hitting stuff. And then, the whole time it's surrounded by stuff like an entire episode where they get turned into zombies or, the butts come back. Or like you do get this whole like weird framing story of these aliens sent back in time to kill them, or rather have been watching them for 50 years. It's
Yeah,
the time travel gets a little squishy too, but
the time travel is frustrating in this season. And not for it, like, it's just because time travel is frustrating, but then it's Doom Patrol, which and don't take this the wrong way, Doom Patrol. If you're someone who works on Doom Patrol and somehow you're listening to Devin Decker say these words, please know that I mean this in the best possible way. Doom Patrol doesn't give a shit. Doom Patrol's just gonna do what Doom Patrol wants to do. So then you give them the keys to a time machine, they gonna do whatever the fuck they want to do with that time machine. And, Oh my God, Rita going back in time and losing her memory because she went back in time. And, like, her being unburdened by her choices and her actions and her life. And that being the only way for her to find happiness is basically amnesia. Like, that is all at once heartbreaking, but also we finally get to see Rita have an actual win. Right? She's been trying to be this hero, and like by getting over all of her anxieties and baggage, she achieves her goal. It's, oh God, they do. Oh, and the time travel, her showing up and being like, no, you have to die to become me. Oh, it's so good. It is really enjoyable stuff. And I gotta tell you, I will admit, after the advent of the MCU comic book movie, which if you've listened to this show long enough, you know that it is different from the comic book movies we were getting 8 years earlier, or freaking, 19 years earlier, right? In like 1989, right? There is something different about what the MCU did. The biggest issue that the MCU created in me is a lack of desire to read Marvel comics. And I know that's crazy, but then that also spread to like, I kind of stopped reading DC comics. I kind of stopped reading comics because the movies were these big spectacles and it wasn't waiting like every month to get an issue, and maybe even that issue is not going to be a full story. So I will admit that I like haven't read a Doom Patrol book since probably 2012. So I don't know if they ever touched on it in there. But the reveal that Cliff Steele, the invincible, immortal robot man, could have Parkinson's was brilliant to me. Right? He's a brain in a jar. He's a brain in a brass body that can move through automation and gears and sprockets and whatever magic robotics actually is. And the fact that his brain is still susceptible to all of the diseases our brains are susceptible to. Like, it hit. And it hit in this way that, like, what a realistic problem that you don't even think of a superhero or an anti-hero. I mean, Doom Patrol's kind of, up in the air as to what you would define them, right? They're the evil X-Men in a lot of ways, evil in kind of quotation marks. They're the dark side of the X-Men, which is a crazy thing to say considering the X-Men have become a analogy to racism and the underrepresented and how the rest of the world treats them. To have an even darker portrayal of what that is in Doom Patrol is crazy. And then for them to go as deep as oh yeah, the brain not in a jar, because that's the actual brain who does play a part of this with his Brotherhood of Evil and the Sisterhood of Dada and everything that else comes up in this freaking season that is just exciting things that I do remember from when I was reading comics as crazily as I was before. Let's give him Parkinson's. And then that's something, you know what? Be a Superman, unless you're the Superman from the movie who can go backwards and change the time stream. What do our superpowers offer to a man with Parkinson's disease?
Yeah.
Honestly,
But to your earlier point about how it's a show that just also doesn't give a shit and is going to do what it's going to do, we talk about all of this grounded realism and examining the idea of Cliff and the idea that he is this brain inside this larger body, and Fraser does this phenomenal job taking those swings at those really big emotional moments. But then there's also an entire plot point that I still have not been able to wrap my head around for a multitude of reasons. In how in the fuck does he digest Calder's brain in order to be de-zombified? What are the mechanics? Tell me, explain those to me.
Well, that part I can actually do. He does. His brain still requires sustenance. They have talked about it before. That's oh my god, Revenge Patrol, I think is the name of it. It's the one where he has the rat inside of him. So, I don't remember the name of the episode. Paw Patrol. Yeah. It's the 5th episode. He has the brain inside. No, Paw Patrol, they have all the dogs. It's one of those. Maybe Doom Patrol. I don't remember the one. But it is the one where the mouse is inside of him and he's having all sorts of issues. One of the big issues is that mouse is tainting his food supply. Because they show it a couple of times in the earlier seasons that he does have a food receptacle that a nutrient paste needs to be filled into so that his brain can still function. Not to bring up the Fall Guy again, but you need carbs. The brain runs on glucose. And it is one of those things about Cliff Steele is that he does require glucose to make sure his brain will stay alive in the Robot Man body. So,
but everything you said implies that there is a mechanism in place for him to ingest this very specific type of food, right?
Yeah.
Not that he just has a straight up mouth and stomach, right?
Well, I mean, part of it is that, so he does have that, but I mean, can he even open his mouth? I feel he can't do that.
This is what I mean, right? Is the show doesn't give a shit. It just, the cure for zombieism is to eat a brain, and so they give him a brain to eat. The end. That is how they resolve that issue.
So they put brain in his nutrient tube, and
works.
That's enough.
Yeah,
I don't know. It doesn't have to be the way, but that's how I always took it. Is that they took a bit of brain, they threw it in his nutrient-rich thing, and then the same stuff that happened for everybody else's brains when it processed, eating a brain happened for him too.
Yeah, but then the idea of zombification affecting his robot body was also really wild.
Well, because it's a brain. I mean, zombification at its base.
No, the rotting of the body, his robot body rotting as well, which is wild.
Yeah, I get.
Again,
yeah, that's true.
The
yeah,
show just doesn't. The show just wants to say they all got turned into zombies. So this is what happens. They all got turned into zombies. Okay. The choice that I remember this a lot. I think I've talked about this actually with Futurama. Somebody once asked a writer of Futurama how do you decide when to stick to Bender loving these people, secretly loving Fry and everything, versus him being kind of a bad guy? And he said, well, it's the joke. If if there's the ability to make a joke, we're going to make it, right? Even if it does kind of go out of canon or whatever you want to. But like this writer talked about very distinctly, like if it's funny for Bender to talk about killing all humans, we're going to do that, even though we know that he does have these feelings for these particular humans. Like he has thrown them under the bus literally multiple times, right? And it's just because it's funny to do so. And striking that balance is hard, right? Like good writers really can strike that balance and make you still understand and appreciate love Bender despite the fact that he may act out, quote unquote, out of character sometimes, right? And like I think about that a lot in these kinds of situations where it's like, man, this was so ridiculous, this was such a big thing. You could call it a quote unquote plot hole if you want, but I don't agree. I don't think that's
No,
really
I
what
don't
it
think
is.
that's it.
I think at the end of the day, it's just this is the joke. This is the story, this is the plot line, and if you're a good enough writer, you can sometimes do that and get away with it, and like the audience either doesn't notice, or if they do notice, they're smiling too much to care,
Yeah.
right? And like this show very much plays with that, where it's like, hey, and then this thing happens, and you're just like, okay, I guess we're doing this, and like you have to be really invested and show, and the material has to earn that from you as an audience member. And it sounds, it's easy for it to earn it from guys like you and me who are open and willing for that. But then to your point about like your family watching it and that just not working for them, right? Versus like my family, who I did not know how they were going to go with this show, but they love this shit, right? They eat it up and they're totally on board, right? So I mean, it really is like this show is walking this really fine line a lot of the time of wanting to tell these really good, these really invested stories, these really character-driven stories. They go out of their way to find actors like Brendan Fraser, to handle these really heavy roles. Literal Oscar winner, we get to say now,
Yep.
Brendan Fraser, like handling these roles, right? And like the ways in which they clearly are invested in telling good stories and making good TV, but then they have to balance that with the silliness of the actual material. And the fact that it works is what makes it so rare. It's another reason why I say that this probably couldn't happen anywhere else, because you also need to have people in the room that are of a certain caliber that, I'm sorry, you're just not going to get when you're talking about a CW writer's room, especially on like a low tier superhero show nowadays.
And especially now after the writer's strike, that like writers' rooms are not as robust or staffed with different people who are going to be able to come together to make sure something like, well, and then Robot Man's brain is a zombie, so his body is falling apart. Though I have always, and this is a personal theory, and maybe there's something that supports it, Cliff Steele in Doom Patrol the series, as opposed to like Flula Borg's Robot Man in Teen Titans Go, because like I've seen all of the Teen Titans Go Doom Patrol stuff because I like the group of people, and it is very different, and it's some hilarious stuff there, I will admit it. Like he is accepted the fact that he is in a robot body. Brendan Fraser's Cliff Steele, I feel like part of it, and the reason why he has such difficulty as Robot Man, is that he has a mental block, and it's really interesting how that mental block affects his brain's like synergy with the robot body. So if we can say that like his inability to accept his situation in life is partially why his life as Robot Man is so difficult, that same synergy, if the brain is zombified, if it's sending out like the stuff where like, and now my arm's gonna fall off, right? Or like my legs aren't gonna move, I have to drag my leg. Like that, the Robot Man body is a robust design. We see that in this series with the fact that Silas is able to give him like the sensation of touch, right? I found these blueprints that he had together. We can build Robot Man 2.0. You can have all of these things that are making it difficult for you to exist in this form as this creature. And it kind of solidifies that theory, or again, maybe it said that like it is his mental blocks that make his life so difficult. And then that's why
Yeah,
when
man.
he,
I
yeah,
mean, I think that's the bit, right?
yeah,
Is like he spends all of this time bitching and moaning about the accident and how he got put into this situation, but he doesn't do anything to actually change who he is as a person. And that's his whole arc, is
yeah,
like watching him learn that human body or robot body, he's still a shitty person, right? And he needs to grow from that.
Yeah.
And that's what makes his best stories are those ones that are focused on that stuff. I do think though there's this really interesting moment in this one where they're talking about time travel, and he's kind of balking at the idea that time travel could exist, and his and his like thought is, if I had access to time travel, I would go beat up my bully. And like Jane turns to him and she's like, that's the thing that you would change of all of the things that have happened to you in your life. You literally started this whole journey with this family with this idea in your head that you would go back and like not die, maybe? No, that doesn't even occur to him. It doesn't.
Yeah, he is. Well, and that's the really good thing with like the Parkinson episode is he wants instant results, right? There's a lot of
Right.
trauma in the fact that like your brain has been removed from your body and you are alive in this robotic form, right? He doesn't
Right.
want, he wants immediately to be all right with that. He doesn't want to have to put in the effort to like mentally be okay with it that would create a better synergy between his living flesh and the metal form. And that is him to a T. Anytime he tries to help or get involved in something, he wants to do it the fastest path. So then like he's a race car driver. That like kind of makes sense, right? I want to go fast. I want to get this done fast. I already want to be at the finish line. And
Yeah, well,
that
and he's a blunt weapon, right?
yeah,
Like he's a brawler. He's not fine tuned at all.
exactly. And that's all he knows is he knows how to like put his head down and run forward. And that's what he does in so many situations. I mean, to the fact that like, okay, I have Parkinson's. Well, the way to get over it, let's take the entire bottle. And that's really where it's like, okay, so you have addictive tendencies because I don't know how you get addicted to Parkinson's medication, but Cliff Steele found a way. And part of that is that because he's going 1,000,000 miles per hour, it requires more and more fuel to maintain that speed. He's oh god, and him dealing with his father in this season, in the
Yeah.
afterlife,
Yeah.
all the moments where like you get to see Brendan Fraser, him with the six pack and the chips and everything, when the Sisterhood of Dada like makes them switch to their alternative form. I don't remember the terminology for it, right? We're both like
But yeah,
he
essentially they end up in like their dream like situation.
yeah,
And
exactly.
they have to be rescued from that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're like subconscious selves
Yeah,
essentially.
their subconscious selves come forward. And that stuff, I mean, like, we see a lot of good Brendan Fraser, and we've seen really good Brendan Fraser performances in Doom Patrol prior to season 3. When he goes into the underground and he has to like save Jane, that first time he goes into the underground in season 1, or all of the stuff in season 2 that we get to see him like back as Brendan Fraser as Robot Man, because he kind of still moves the way that Robot Man moves. It's fantastic. I mean, Riley Shanahan gets a bunch of credit for being the guy in the Robot Man like makeup and costume most of the time, and Brendan Fraser's a voice actor. But those times where Brendan Fraser has to be Cliff Steele again are magnificent. And that's like one of the reasons why, for our celebrations of Brendan Fraser, Doom Patrol is always going to be something we point a light at. Right? I mean,
Well,
it's.
and also, I think it's also really interesting to come back to the show now at a time where he has won an Oscar, and we have kind of seen the Renaissance, right, and that whole thing. And like, I don't think that we're through with that. I think he's going to have another good couple of roles in the next few years that people are really going to light up about. We're in this kind of midst of people kind of rediscovering him, and this show is one that I think really kind of got that ball rolling in a lot of ways. Not necessarily this is the one that everybody knows him from, but like thinking about this coming out in 2019, and that kind of and people kind of raising their eyebrows at the idea that like the that was like the big like reveal was it's Doom Patrol and Brendan Fraser's going to be in it as Robot Man. It was like that was like part and parcel of like the release of the information was those two was like, hey, this is the show and this is the hook, right? And like
Yeah.
to kind of
Yeah.
and people scratching their heads about like where has he been to now this idea of like, man, I can't believe this is the guy that like we love, this Oscar-winning actor that we all adore, and he is doing this entire storyline about a rat crawling through his gears, right? Like,
Yeah, it is. And it's great. And he's committed to the characters. Everything with Clara this season, like you had already mentioned, is really good. Him trying to be a dad, but also with that robot man foot to the ground, like I gotta go as fast as possible to be her father. And that sort of being what grounds him when she's like, we can't go immediately to being a happy father and daughter, right? Like that starts out in season 2 where he kills the alligator. So it's nice to see that story continue as this is happening, and him having to deal with his issues with his father to be a better father. He has this great storyline, and it is but one of like 5 or 6 great storylines that are happening in season 3. Because Rita, like, actually wanting to be a hero, to be the, Elasti-Girl? Is that what her name is?
I don't know if
No,
that's
that's
what
the
she goes
Incredibles.
with.
I'm sorry.
Oh man. But you're talking about when she goes back in time and she loses her memory and she oh man, what do they call her?
No, Elasti-Girl is Rita Farr's name. Good.
It is
It is
Elasti-Girl?
Elasti-Girl. Yeah. Ooh, I thought I was crazy about that. Like, no, she's
I thought you were
Elasti-Girl.
crazy about that.
Well,
Bendy.
yes. No, but it's one of those situations where, like, her focus has always been like she wants to be that better person. And then like with Cyborg and the whole superhero training, and we're part of a team, and her like, I'm going to be the leader of this team, I'm going to step up now, and like for her to actually get the opportunity to do it and to be good at it when she is unfettered from like her doubts and anxieties.
Yeah.
That's really fun storytelling. Jane and everything with Kay taking over, and that leading to the personalities, like we were created to protect her, so if she is becoming mentally healthy, what happens to us?
Right.
That's deep shit right there too. Like there's a lot going on in season 3. And like we haven't even touched on the brain and his
Larry,
whole...
or like I thought you were gonna say Larry and the bug. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean
Yeah,
Larry
whole...
and the bug, but like the other driving force is like we've seen the brain before, right? He came up briefly in season 2, or maybe it's just season 3. They're weirdly conflated and connected in my head because of the fact that the finale is the start of this season. So you bring a lot of that baggage forward with you, which I mean that's what you should do anyway from season to season of television. But it's...
Yeah, but I will tell you this though, it was real hard to get back on the train for season 3 when season 2 had such a kind of non-committal ending, shall we say, right? Like convincing ourselves, like me and the family convincing ourselves to sit back down and get back into 3 was not as easy as it should have been, and probably, and I think would have been easier if we had gotten an actual conclusion episode to season 2. I understand why it didn't happen. Like COVID, it's not like there was somebody, like COVID is not a person you can point a finger at and blame everything on. But like I get that, like that was why we didn't get that. But man, did it make it hard to come back to season 3. I'm glad I did. I mean, of course I did, but like it was not as easy as it should have been.
Yes, I agree. But it was, when I finally sat down and watched season 3, I'm like, oh man, it is satisfying to have an ending to the Dorothy storyline. And not that, I mean, Dorothy still sticks around, right? We haven't even talked about the Dead Boys detective episode where Dorothy and Larry and the Dead Boy detectives have to bring them back from the afterlife. Like, and then now that the Dead Boy detectives have a series, that's so crazy to me, because that episode for a streaming series does feel like a weird backdoor pilot for those characters, right? You only have 1 or 2 mains from the series.
I mean, it always does whenever they bring up characters like this. I feel this way about Doom Patrol. I feel this way about Titans. Like, I feel like every time they go out of their way to bring in like a big old like group of people and like really go hard on like making them part of the story, I instantly am just like, well, now I just want to watch the show of them. Like, where's their show?
Yeah, where's the Lustbusters episodes and series? They're weird. Those characters are weird to me. But I'd watch like 8 episodes of them, like just cock blocking people who are having too much sexually.
We are in a series. Yeah, we are in a series that had its very own backdoor pilot in Titans. Right? With so. Yeah.
And that is a weird episode. And by all accounts, there's another episode that like is supposed to tie it all together. I haven't watched that yet, because what I will say is it was difficult for me to get into season 3 of Doom Patrol, and then finding out that season 4 was going to be a part A, part B situation. Like, I was not interested in watching 5 episodes of the series and waiting after what happened with Wax Patrol and Possibilities Patrol. Like, I was not like, I don't want to wait for my life to be over. Sorry, I'm such an asshole. But yeah, so I mean, I'm happy I watched season 3. I really like a lot of the stuff they do with it. Rita finally getting like, it's a really good 3rd season of a series, right? And not a lot of 3rd seasons can say that. There, I said it. I will go with that. I mean, is there anything else you want to make sure that we touch on from this season, or like? The other thing is that this was like one big wild ride for me. Like, I've never not consumed this all at once. And then the stuff that stick with me are things like the Forever Young, the Zombie Butts, the Dead Boy Detectives, Rita getting to be here, like the Malcolm storyline, the fact that she was friends with Madame Rogue or Rouge. I screw that one up too. Because
it's the same with me. You mentioned Sonic earlier, and I felt myself almost getting into the same conversation.
Yeah. I feel like a jerk about that one, but like, I don't know, like it's really good. Like, this is the Brendan Fraser that we get to see kind of before Killers of the Flower Moon. It's certainly the Brendan Fraser that we get to see before The Whale, where he wins his best actor Oscar. I never thought I could portmanteau actor and Oscar, but Devin Decker found a way. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's really exciting, and I will say this: it also makes me sad to think about the idea that we won't get to see his version of Firefly, right, from Batgirl, that got canned. Like that kind of stuff. Really, it makes me. With this kind of material, with the comic book material, and the problem that they had back in the 90s and the 2000s when they were making these movies is the people behind them were not making them earnest. As silly as these stories are, they have to be made with earnest intent behind them in order for them to land in any meaningful way, right? And I think that that's why Iron Man hits as hard as it does when Favreau makes Iron Man, because it is him putting a lot of himself on screen. It is Robert Downey Jr. for sure putting a ton of himself on screen and putting like a lot of earnest effort into telling like a really compelling character-driven story that just also happens to have a super suit in it, right? And Doom Patrol is so good at earnestly telling these character-driven stories while wrapped up in these silly ass stories, and seeing actors like Fraser come in and just go for it, like is part of that magic, right? And the idea that we're not going to get to see that in any way, like for any reason, is so disappointing. Whether it was Firefly and Batgirl or some other movie of his that we found out never made it off the ground, it's disappointing to think about. But all the more reason why what I said earlier, consume the shit now while you can. If this is something you're interested in actually like taking in and having as part of your repertoire, like watch it before it's gone.
Yeah, that is an unfortunate truth about that. And it's also kind of like the nastiest thing about Doom Patrol. This is the 3rd season we're talking about. It came out in 2021. Its last episode aired November 11th, 2021. And we, at the Say Report, who dedicate an entire month to talking about Brendan Fraser and his various projects that he has done throughout his career, are only talking about it now 3 years later. And, I mean, the reasoning behind that is, honestly, other things came up with Fraser that were more important to me. I'll say that it's for me. The fact that he was doing The Whale, the fact that he was going to be in Killers of the Flower Moon, which was like already something that Siegen like tied my finger to the pulse of to make sure that I was following along with that. So like this sort of weirdly fell to the wayside, and I'm very happy that we were able to watch the third season. That with Zaslav and everything that he's done, the fourth season still happened, and that they got to finish this story. It's not something that we saw with a lot of the other stuff that is now gone from existence from HBO Max. Or just Max,
or even
right?
or even in the DC television universe, right? Because it's also not just Max. We're also, things have dialed back in this regard on the CW as well, right? Or there was a couple of other places where things were popping up, but CBS that didn't last long.
It went over to CW afterwards.
Yeah, right, exactly. But like those shows have all kind of fallen off as well, right? And so there's something about this idea that we are watching the world really kind of move past the initial hype of the superhero movie story, television show, whatever you want to call it, right? But we've moved past that initial big hype of it, and I don't know what's going to make it out to the other side of this, right? I straight up had no idea that there was a new Captain America movie coming out. Like I was for sure ready for Disney to kind of put a bunch of stuff on the back burner and see and like refigure like where things are at. But then I was sitting at like McDonald's the other day, and there's like a big poster for the toys coming to McDonald's soon. So I'm just like, oh, okay, I guess this one's happening. Like, and that idea that we're in this kind of like holding pattern right now where we're not sure what's going to actually still exist. Add to that all of the stuff that's going on with streaming and the ways in which more and more media is just kind of going to the wayside. I don't see a lot of this stuff being available to us as easily as we would like in the coming years, right? And it's just this kind of all goes back to what I was saying about how just like amazing it is to see that Doom Patrol ever even got made in the way that it did, works as well as it does, and is still available to us. Like I said, somebody up there has got to just really have it like a love for this show. Somebody in some important seat somewhere is making sure that it is still available to us, and I don't know how long they're going to be able to keep that shit up.
Yeah, so it is a rally cry. Go watch Doom Patrol if all of our talking about Doom Patrol interests you. If you have Max, sit down, join the family, and watch this exceedingly depressing, yet like it warms my heart to see how they overcome. I do love that. And I'm glad that you brought up Captain America Brave New World. Siegen, it was supposed to release this past Friday. That's the reason why we're seeing toys at McDonald's. May 3rd, 2024 was its release date. And it has since been delayed to July 26, 2024, and now February 14th, 2025. And this goes back to, like, Black Widow. When I saw Black Widow in the theaters, and confidently beforehand, Disney was like, here's all the movies that are coming out through 2025. And I'm like, that was a mistake, Disney. And Captain America Brave New World is only the like most recent piece of evidence that supports that feeling from me. Because if you're going to say a movie's coming out, you're going to make the tie-in deals. You're going to do the marketing. The fact that, spoilers for Captain America Brave New World, from the McDonald's Happy Meal, Red Hulk is going to be in the movie, is the toy I got in my Captain America Brave New World Happy Meal. And considering there's been a pretty big cash change to the person in the comics who was the identity of the Red Hulk, that's a big deal. The fact that, like, I know that Diamondback is going to be there because of the McDonald's Happy Meal. So, like, are they doing Serpent Society? Like, this is... Now we're on the other side of Doom Patrol. I'm sorry, everybody, but Doom Patrol is over. It's finished, right? We're going to talk about the... the fourth season eventually. It's not going to be this year. Hopefully next year. Because, again, it could go away at any moment, right? And we don't want talking about Doom Patrol to become this weird time capsule. But it is this complete story that for all of the insanity that is on representation in that story, seems to have avoided any sort of meddling oversight that, like, ends up making it kind of a joke. You bring up Captain America Brave New World, and A, that you didn't know about it, but then B, that McDonald's is the first place that we got to see the new Falcon because of their marketing. And it's not like the toy of the new Falcon. It is legitimately like poster representation of that character broken by McDonald's. Doom Patrol somehow avoided being a joke in the superhero genre. And maybe that's because they made themselves a joke right from the beginning, right? We're all going in a donkey's asshole. Sorry. It's the fact of it,
yeah,
right?
I mean, it's the beauty of what this show does, right? Is just I think it's a really meta way to kind of look at it, but I think it is part of the whole like steez of the show, right? Is like there's so much important stuff going on in this thing, and it's so precious, and we don't know when we're gonna lose it. So like enjoy it while you've got it, which I feel like is so much on brand with what that show is doing and saying, right?
Right, exactly. I mean, they should be immortal, but based on the world they live in, at any moment, the assistant of the guy who was sent to kill them 50 years ago might lose his mind and just go to town on the series with his death ray.
Oh shit, man.
Yeah. I don't know. Check out Dead Boy Detectives. It is a weird continuation. I haven't watched it yet on Netflix, but it is the characters from the Afterlife Patrol episode. And that episode always felt like they were trying to set up a Dead Boy Detective show to me. The fact that it happened is really crazy. And I'm excited to watch it on Netflix. And as Sejan said, they tied it into not Sleepwalker. That's the Marvel version of the character Sandman. And my favorite character in Marvel Comics, because I was never exposed to Sandman until later in life and was like, oh, it's just a rip-off of Sleepwalker. And I got slapped in the face because it was the other way around. And I apologize. All of that being said, watch out for the zombie butts. And if you have the time and you're looking for, if you long for the way that superhero entertainment used to make you feel, Doom Patrol is the place to go. If you are vibing on X-Men 97, which I will say, I'm still not, there's only 2 episodes of X-Men 97 left. And if you happen to have Max, I think Doom Patrol is the type of thing that might be able to soothe that empty spot inside of you once X-Men 97 ends. Don't quote me on that, though. Right? I don't want the pitchforks and the mobs coming for me because I woefully misread that situation. Anything else you want to share, Siege, before we tell people what to look for in our Brendan Fraser History Month celebration for next episode?
No, I was actually going to roll into that. So let's talk about next episode.
All right. So this has been Doom Patrol Season 3. Weirdly brief overview of the whole sort of thing of it. Go check it out. The brain is there. Big, smart monkeys who are his, like, garçon. Major domos are there. Giant robots. Family. All that stuff is in Doom Patrol Season 3. Go check that out. But if you want to make sure that you are on book and you are ready to engage in a conversation, the next episode of the Say Report, you have to go against a recent poll that said the perfect length for a film is 92 minutes and watch the 3 hours and 11 minutes of Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon. And of those 3 hours and 11 minutes, I think Brendan Fraser's in 4 of the minutes. But we're still going to do it because he's there, and there's a reason why he's there, and it all has to do with Brendan Fraser History Month, who he is, who he has become, the Renaissance, and all of that. So check out Killers of the Flower Moon. When it was nominated for Best Picture, Leonardo DiCaprio's there, Robert De Niro. It's a hell of a cast. Lily Gladstone. It's a good, I've seen it. So I will say, it's a good watch. It's a long watch. It's a heavy watch. But, you just watched Doom Patrol Season 3, right? So I think you can handle what Flowers of the Killer Moon is putting out there. Anything else, Siege, that you want to tell the people for this one?
No, I'm gonna hold on to my thoughts and my feelings till next week because it is time to talk about this movie, right? Like I brought it up all those years ago when it first got announced, and the fact that then Fraser got added to it and all that. Like I'm excited to talk about it, and I think we're gonna have some interesting discussions depending on a couple of things. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, so with all of that said, we have to go watch and prepare to talk about a 3-hour movie. So this has been the first episode of Brendan Fraser History Month 2024. Thank you for joining us. If you find us on the social media under the Say Report, you can find links to join our Discord. We would love to have you there. I recently found out about the 131 disc Dark Shadows complete DVD collection. That's 1,225 episodes. I've been losing my mind, and I've been putting all those thoughts into the Discord. So if you want to be part of it, join us in the Discord. But until next time, William, please bring us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Stephen Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.